I helped my neighbor Tom build a pool, nearly falling into an affair with his wife Sarah. Welcome to the Love and Betrayed Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. My name is Jake Carter. I was born in a mid-sized city in the Midwest. I grew up as an only child in a typical American family. This is my story in high school. I was an athlete and played on the handball team. It's not the most popular sport in most parts of the country, but it was common in our town. We had a fanatical coach from Eastern Europe who introduced this sport to our school. I was a good athlete, tall and slim, but I was attracted to handball mainly because of the pretty girls. Did I mention that the women's team trained on the court next to where we trained? Did I mention these girls were beautiful? Our coach was smart enough to make us train next to them every day. This has certainly attracted many of the school's best athletes to join our team. A real honey trap. With this motivation, I eventually became the team's top scorer. There was a girl in our class named Zoe Hart, who played on the girls' team. She was beautiful, tall blonde with stunning gray eyes. Zoe and I became friends during our senior year of high school. Zoe was excellent at math and I was good with computers, so we had a lot in common beyond handball. She thought I was cute and funny and we became a couple. We lost our virginity to each other over the summer. We were lovers all summer, but after a few weeks, Zoe told me that since we would be attending colleges in different states, it would be better for us to break up rather than try to maintain a long-distance relationship. I was upset at the time and we broke up then. I was lonely the last month of summer. After breaking up with Zoe, my neighbor, Tom Evans, hired me to help him build a pool in his backyard. He offered me some money and free use of the pool once it was completed. I needed money to fix my old car, so this was perfect. Tom took a couple of weeks off and I helped him build the pool. His wife, Sarah, always brought us something to drink while we worked and cooked us lunch. I always asked for skim milk instead of soda or beer. The first time I asked for it, she looked at me a little strange, but brought the milk. We completed the pool in less than 2 weeks and Tom paid me more than promised. After that he returned to work. I spent a lot of time by his pool for the rest of the summer. Tom and Sarah had 2 younger sons, ages 6 and 8. I liked these boys and played with them a lot by the pool. Sarah loved that. I entertained her sons in August. I was using the pool almost every day and began to notice that Sarah was often looking at me with interest. I must admit that I also looked at her with interest, because she was a beautiful 29-year-old woman with large breasts and long legs. I especially loved it when she wore a bikini and spent time by the pool with us. She was from Eastern Europe and had a killer accent that always turned me on. One day I was by the pool and getting ready to leave. The boys were in their rooms playing video games. I mentioned to Sarah that I needed to buy things for my college dorm. She said she knew about all the sales and would help me with my shopping. She told me to go with her the next day when her sons were busy with sports so that we could spend the whole day together. She then walked towards me, pressing her chest against my chest and ran her finger over my face. She came close and whispered in my ear, lightly touching it with her lips. You know, Jake, in my home country there is an expression, it translates to different gyms train the body better. My hormones were raging and I had a hard time saying WHW. What does that mean? It means Jake, she said, drawing back slowly to look into my eyes with a look as if I were a piece of meat and she a hungry dog. That another lover would be the most exciting thing for me. I froze in place. See you tomorrow, Jake, she said with a twinkle in her eye. I returned home in a state of lust. I told my dad I wanted to go college shopping with Sarah. My father caught on quickly and learned the whole story from me with a few hints. He told me to think that if I had an affair with Sarah, she might lose her husband. He asked me if Tom divorced Sarah, would I leave college and marry Sarah and raise her children? I told him I didn't love her and didn't want to marry her. He told me to think about the fact that although Tom was a good man, he was also a strong man and would not tolerate me sleeping with his wife. He told me to think about the fact that Tom, as a man, would probably beat me up if he found out that I slept with his wife. He told me that, although he and Mom would visit me in the hospital if I survived, they wouldn't be too sorry about what happened to me if Tom got to me. This gave me something else to think about. He also told me that if Tom beat me, he would go to jail. If this happens, will I stay in college and help Sarah and her children? By the end of our conversation, I felt embarrassed. My father convinced me and I canceled this adventure with Sarah. I don't think I ever thought about adultery before talking to my father, but he gave me a lot to think about. I realized that adultery is not something to be condoned or practiced. Everyone loses. Needless to say, I didn't go to Tom and Sarah's pool again after that, and I didn't talk to Sarah for a long time. I went to college and lived a normal student life. I dated a few girls and even slept with a few, but I didn't find the one. I wasn't too wild, but sometimes I went out and drank my share of beer. Interestingly, except at parties, milk remained my favorite drink. After graduating from college, I returned home. I got a job in a medium-sized company working in the IT department. Shortly before starting work, I accidentally met Zoe. She told me that she had been hired to teach math at a local high school. She was lonely. I was lonely, so we started dating. We soon fell in love. A few months after we resumed our relationship, she became pregnant. I invited her to become my wife and she accepted my offer. We got married soon after and lived a happy married life. Our son was born 4 months after our wedding. Our daughter was born 2 years later. Zoe stayed home with our children. We planned for her to do this until they both went to school at least. Our sex life was probably similar to most young married couples with small children. 3-4 times a week. My mother's parents died and left me some money which I used for a down payment on a nice house in the country. This windfall, plus my fairly good salary, allowed us to live comfortably with my one job. However, we didn't do too many extravagant things. Our typical vacations and holidays were spent with my family or Zoe's family. My father's parents lived in an old house on a lake about 50 miles away, and we visited them often. They had a big one, an empty house, and they loved it. When we came to them, we fished, played in the water, and just had a great time as a family. My grandfather was a hunter and I often went hunting with him. We would bring home games and my grandmother and wife would cook it. My father was more of a fisherman, so hunting was something me and my grandfather did together. Just the two of us. My dad used to take my son fishing, so maybe this will become a special tradition for the two of them. My grandfather loved to hunt birds with a shotgun. One day he told me while hunting how he once scared the life out of a man who tried to molest my grandmother by replacing the buckshot in the cartridge with fine salt. Obviously, once it hits a person, it causes pain for several days, plus it scares the one who was on the other end of the barrel. He died when the children were still small and my grandmother moved to our city. We kept the old house and my father kept the weapons and ammunition. My wife was adamantly against having them in our house because of the kids and all that. Sometimes all the logic in the world cannot convince a woman. So there is no point in arguing. When I wanted to go hunting on my grandparents' property, I would just go to my parents and pick up a gun. In the summer we often went to my parents or Zoe's parents for the day. Often, when we did this, we would visit Tom and Sarah at the pool. They liked our children as I once liked theirs. Many years have passed since Sarah proposed to me indecently and there has been no tension between us. In fact, she seemed to be a model wife and mother. I wrote off her behavior towards me as a one-time incident. In fact, Sarah became a real aunt to our children. I worked for my employer for just over 8 years and became a project manager when my boss received permission from the CEO and owners to build a central system. In short, this was a great opportunity for our company and in particular for my career. It took many months of long hours of work. I worked late almost every evening for most of the year, but luckily we only worked 1 or 2 weekends a month. It put a strain on my relationship with my wife and children, but I did for the sake of my family. 6 or 7 months into the project, I was sent to another city for 2 weeks to work with another department. There I worked closely with another department head. Her name was Ndui. She was a stunning 30-year-old brunette with a great head on her shoulders and magnificent breasts. She was married and had a son and daughter like me. I knew her from the first days of working for the employer, when she worked in the same office. We always got a long way, and it was nice to see her again. We worked together for most of those 2 weeks, and there was obvious chemistry between us. I worked with her or her colleagues all day long until the evening. Emma had dinner and drinks with me several times, reminiscing about old acquaintances and simply supporting each other. She explained that her husband had gone to stay with his parents for a week with the children while she was busy with the project. I couldn't help but notice that Emma was becoming more and more flirtatious with me. As the weeks passed, I also noticed that she wore sexy perfume and had a habit of unbuttoning her blouse and pressing her breasts against me every chance she got. I had been out of the game for a long time, but I knew the signals and wanted me. No doubt I was tempted by this, especially since my sexual needs had been suffering for the last few months and my wife was several states away. Anne and I were the last ones to work on the Friday before I left on Saturday. She insisted that we go to dinner together on our last night. When I met her at the hotel bar, my jaw dropped. She was dressed to the nines, a low-cut little black dress that showed off all the different curves of her breasts. Her high heels showed off her legs and her knee-length slit skirt showed off her entire left leg. As she walked, I ordered her a drink and asked where she wanted to go for dinner. She said in a quiet, seductive voice, "How about we go to your room and order dinner there?" I muttered something unintelligible and she continued, "Don't be shy, Jake. We've been working towards this for 2 weeks and you know it. Damn, today in the office, when we were together, I was so horny that you must felt it. Tonight, my husband is away. Your wife is a million miles away, and only you and me just this one time." I looked at her in amazement. Never in my life have I experienced such temptation. Honestly, I've probably never been this excited before. It was as if I was enveloped in a cloud of pheromones and I felt dizzy somewhere deep inside. I knew this would happen that night, but nothing prepared me for the reality of seduction. I looked at her eyes, lips, breasts, and then she kissed me heartbreaking kiss and I answered her. God help me, but I wanted her more than I had ever wanted a woman in my life, and then her arms wrapped around my shoulders. My hands were on her hips, then on her ass, and we were alone in the sea of emptiness. I drove home from the airport on autopilot. I passed the test before my will was broken. The kiss was broken and I pulled away deep within. I found the strength to resist and reject what every cell in my body desperately wanted. I was amazed at how close I came to the abyss but felt proud that I did not fall into the abyss. I felt as if I had awakened from a cum state. Emma gave me a sexual arousal that I had never experienced before. And didn't take it very well, calling me a pathetic coward or something similar, but I just smiled, nodded, wished her good night and went back to my room. When I returned home to my family, I couldn't hug or kiss them. I think I surprised everyone with my reaction, but I was truly happier than ever. On Saturday and Sunday nights, I had long, passionate, tender sex with Mel while the kids slept. She was happy with me and we renewed our vows of love for each other. That weekend I decided to pay more attention to my wife and children, even if I had to work crazy hours. On Monday I returned to work, reported to my boss about my 2 weeks away, sorted out my mail and went home at a reasonable hour for the first time in months. Mel was again surprised by my early return. I joined her at our son's handball game, saw him for the first time this season, chatted with other parents and had some quality family time. After that we went for pizza that night. I made love to my wife for the 3rd time that weekend, for the first time in a year, I'm sure. Wow, she said, wiping the sweat from her brow after our 2nd round of love. If I hadn't missed you so much when you were away, I would have suggested that you go away for 2 weeks more often. I just realized how important you are to me, I said, and I wanted to show you how much I love you, and I apologize if I haven't shown it enough in recent months. Honey, I know you do this for us, but it's nice when you show it like this. Now, let me show you how much I love you, she said. A 3rd round of passionate sex followed again for the first time in a long time for us. A few days later, Emma called. She was flirtatious and elusive, but I sensed that she wanted to know if I had changed my mind about her proposal. I told her politely but firmly that I did not regret my decision to refuse and that I would not cheat on my wife. She apologized for her persistent behavior. I told her not to worry about it and assured her that I would remain silent. She expressed gratitude for this and then sounded embarrassed by the whole thing. I told her that she would seduce me if I were a bachelor. It was a compliment to her that it was so difficult for me to refuse her advances. She cried a little and said that her husband was neglecting her and that she had strong suspicions that he might have an affair. She said she had never cheated on him before, but she, like me, was attracted to me and thought I was the perfect person to get some attention, affection and affirmation of her attractiveness. I told her I understood that. I told her I didn't want to interfere in her relationship, but I wished her well. A few months later, I was sent back to Emma's office for a week of meetings again. I worked long days and evenings with Emma and her team during the testing period. Emma was very civil to me, but I noticed that she had a very close relationship with a young colleague named Jeff. One evening at the office, I went to the bathroom in a nearly empty office building, and when I came back I found Jeff stroking Emma's ass and whispering in her ear. Emma noticed me at the door and sort of pushed Jeff away. She had the tact enough to be a little embarrassed, and I had the tact enough not to talk about it. I was glad that Emma was not my wife. A couple of months later our big project was successfully completed and I was expected to receive a promotion and a raise in salary. This made me happy, but I was even happier that I would be able to return to a more normal work schedule. My boss sent me and several members of my team to a week-long workshop in Jacksonville, Florida. Never before or since have I seen so many attractive women with such large breasts per capita as in Northeast Florida. Surprising, really. I met a lot of people from different companies. One evening I was in a hotel bar where a seminar was taking place. I was the youngest at the table, only 29 years old. When I said this, one of the guys at the table asked if the first wave of divorces was starting among my friends. I asked what he meant. He explained that nowadays everyone gets married in their early or mid-20s and divorces start in their late 20s and early 30s. The rest of the table nodded and laughed. One of the men at the table, an older man in his 50s, said that he had been married twice and that he was successful in his second divorce. I asked what he meant. He said he got burned in the first divorce, so he prepared for the second just in case. He said that he secretly hid some money from his second wife very carefully so as not to be discovered in the event of a divorce. I questioned his honesty and he explained that his second wife wasn't honest either when he caught her cheating on him with a pool player. In any case, his thought was that if the marriage was successful, he would have a secret reserve for emergencies and extra money for his grandchildren. But since his wife turned out to be a cheating, he ended up with a secret fund for a fresh start after the divorce. He managed to hide over 110,000 which his wife never discovered. He had started a new life after his second divorce. Well done. Everyone at the table seemed to have their own story about divorce nightmares or knew a few friends who had been through the grinder. This was a revelation for me. Although I loved and trusted my wife, I began to think that the secret fund idea was a pretty smart move. If nothing else, this could be a great secret education fund for the kids or a nice surprise for the wife when she retires in 30 or 35 years. From that day on, I began saving in a secret fund, withdrawing small amounts each week and requesting that all bonuses be paid separately into separate retirement accounts. In total, this was about 5% of my gross income, enough to make a difference, not enough to be too noticeable. Life went on. The kids grew up. Mel and I thrived and I was happy. 3 years later I met Anne again at a company event. She told me that Jeff, the same colleague, had been her lover several years ago, but that he had moved to California and she had not had a lover since then. Her marriage improved and she and her husband, Jim, repaired their relationship for the sake of their children. We were alone at the table and the loud music allowed us to talk with some privacy, so I joked a little and asked her how it all happened and her honesty surprised me. How did you reconcile with your husband? It's interesting because I caught him cheating. Jim has a construction company and one of his employees was his mistress. I confronted him about it and told him to stop. Of course I didn't tell him that I cheated on him, so you were the engine of reconciliation. Huh, yeah, I guess so. After I confronted him about it, he broke things off with her and asked me for forgiveness. I said I'd try, but we needed to go to a marriage counselor. That was my best idea, but you were never honest with him. True, but he was a worse cheater than me. We worked with a counselor for several months in family and individual sessions. We solved our core problems, which were more serious than the cheating itself. So no, I didn't fully confess, but I also didn't hurt him too much for his cheating. I just wanted to fix us. At that moment I think it's easier for sinners to forgive each other. I noticed and looked at me thoughtfully. Then said exactly. The counselor was smart and he figured out that I too had cheated. We talked about it in my individual sessions, but he kept my secret from Jim. He agreed that my cheating was related to self-esteem and acceptance, perhaps even revenge, but my infidelity was not the problem in our relationship. The lack of care and attention for each other was the problem. Besides communication and prioritizing time together, he also recommended an interesting sexual practice that helped save our marriage. Really, that's interesting. I prodded. You see, this is kind of awkward to discuss, but I trust you. Part of rebuilding our intimacy and emotional connection involved a very primal physical connection. What could be more primal than sex between a man and a woman? I asked and said, blushing a little. Well, the marriage counselor recommended anal sex to us and we are now an anal couple. MR, it's an acronym. It stands for Adult Lactation Relationships. What the I was confused. Adult lactation relationship. This is an intimate connection between a man and a woman in addition to our normal sex life, which by the way, has never been better. It also includes regulation ardent sessions of my caring for him. It really brought us into a closer bond what we've ever had before. I stared at her somewhat stunned. Some colleagues came to our table and we stopped talking. As weird as Anna may sound, I was glad Emma and Jim made up. I wasn't sure I could be in their shoes, but to each their own. If they were happier now, then I was happy for them. It wasn't until our daughter, Sophie, was 10 years old and my son, Adam, was 12, that Zoe finally returned to teaching middle school math. She took a couple of advanced courses that summer, but was able to get back to work right away. She was truly gifted when it came to math. In this sense, our children followed her. In fact, they were both excellent students like Zoe and me. They were tall and good athletes. They also became team handball players. I was very proud of my children. Zoe gave herself completely to her work. I suppose, as the children grew older and needed her less, she began to look for another way out. In addition to teaching middle school math, she volunteered to coach the school's math team, so she met with several experienced students and taught them twice a week, with an additional 2 hours of studying after school. She received a small stipend for her work, but it wasn't about the money. She prepared them for student Olympiads in mathematics. Under her leadership, the team performed very well as a team. They finished third in the state their first year. The following year they finished second and qualified for nationals. She traveled with students to Pennsylvania for a competition. One of her students, a shy lanky kid named Max, placed in the top 10 math students in a national competition and eventually received a full academic scholarship to CTAC. Zoe was especially proud of him because he was talented, but she never really gave math her all until she picked him for the math team. In the 2 years he was on the team, she devoted more time and effort to him. Their hard work and dedication paid off. I was proud of Zoe's accomplishments. Life was good by this time. I was 37 years old. I was successful and happy at work and with my family. I still went out hunting from time to time, and we still went as a family to my grandparents' property to fish and play in the water. We still visited our parents often and spent time at Tom and Sarah's pool. Life was good. Of course, my sex life with Mel has slowed down a bit. We were no longer children in our 20s, but we still had a pretty good, if rather familiar, personal life. I still loved her with all my heart, and we still had fun together when we had time. Her return to work cut into our time together. She was often busy with the math team or grading homework, quizzes and tests, but I couldn't envy her teaching career. It clearly brought her great satisfaction. In any case, my responsibilities at work also increased and I began to spend many of my own hours. However, I had more time alone than before when the children were busy with their own affairs and Mel was busy with her work. I have always liked fiction and I discovered online sites with stories. I liked science fiction and adventure stories, but I also came across several sites with erotic stories. I'm hooked on stories about cheating wives, not fantasies about jerks and cuckolds, but dramatic stories about cheating wives. To be honest, it has become a minor obsession for me. Every day I scoured new content, searching for stories of love, loss and betrayal. I took pleasure in getting revenge on cheating and cheered on husbands when they rose from the ashes, moved on and lived their best lives. Although my marriage was strong, I had seen enough of my friends go through the meat grinder of divorce that I could sympathize with their plight. I must admit that reading these stories hooked me. I guess if you read too much of this stuff, you'll get some crazy ideas in your head. In any case, this happened to me, although I trusted my wife. I had minor suspicions, telling myself I was doing it as a joke. I even secretly tested my children's DNA. They were mine. It's okay. And yet my suspicions did not completely subside. I read more and started thinking about bugs and webcams for secret surveillance. I bought these tools from my secret accounts and I connected these electrical gadgets to a dedicated personal server in my office. Schools were closed for the summer. Adam and Sophie left for summer camp. At the same time, Zoe was at home most of the day. I collected bugs and webcams in our house and activated the recordings. I checked the activity for a few days without finding anything out of the ordinary and started to feel like crap. Why did I do this? Why did I invade my wife's privacy? Because of paranoia from reading a bunch of stupid stories, I stopped my madness and forgot about the surveying instrument. Around this time a rather large project landed on my desk. I've been very busy for a couple of weeks. After we finally completed the project, I returned to my office shuffling papers and fiddling with my electronic files. I remembered my geodetic project. I intended to ruin this whole crazy operation, but I decided to look through a few files just in case. I looked at them and almost fell out of my chair in surprise. It was literally the first tape I watched. My loving wife had a lover, a recent high school graduate, a star on the math team and a future CTech student. This little bastard apparently lost his virginity to my cheating wife. It was a whole seduction routine where my wife was his sex teacher. It's not lost on me that this is very similar to the Saar episode of my youth, except this bastard actually my wife. I watched a couple more videos and indeed they had sex several times at my house while my children were at camp. I didn't listen to everything, but it was clear that my wife was very interested in little Maxby and not just in his brain. It turned out that my wife had taken her tutoring to the next level. It was clear that she intended to end things with him after their 2-week date, but that was not a mistake. I was furious. My first idea was to kill them, but I allowed myself to calm down a little and realized that I didn't want to go to jail. Besides, I was not a murderer and could not do this to my children. My next idea was to find a way to frame my wife and send her to prison for several years. Obviously, I had to think carefully about this whole situation. I instructed my secretary to put all my calls on hold, cancel all appointments for the day, and not allow anyone to disturb me. I closed the door and carefully studied the voice files. If the affair had started while Maxby Boy was still in high school, my wife could have been fired and maybe even arrested, but it turned out that their brief romance began only in that 2-week period after its end. So maybe there won't be any criminal charges or guaranteed dismissal. But I could be a vindictive bastard and expose my wife to our community as a cheating teacher. Best case scenario, public humiliation for her and she'll probably lose her job and her teaching license. But I didn't want to humiliate my children. They didn't deserve to be collateral damage in all of this. The same went for her parents. They always treated me well. I listened carefully to the last few recordings and realized that they were planning the last meeting. I'll see you tomorrow. Damned thoughts of reprisals flooded my mind again. I had a hard time forcing myself to calm down, although I didn't want to share the video of my wife cheating. I assumed she didn't know it. This way I could blackmail my future ex-wife and get better divorce terms. This would give me some satisfaction and just justice. But Maxby also needed to be taught a lesson. I remembered my grandfather's decision in a similar situation many years ago. I took the day off and called the best divorce lawyer. I made an appointment for the next day and took 2 more days off. I went to my parents and told them what I found out. Sometime later my father found me in the basement with my grandfather's old shotguns. He was alarmed, but I explained my intentions to him. He eventually helped replace lead shot with fine salt and some cartridges. I also took one of my grandfather's old pistols with me. I called my cheating wife and told her that I had to leave town for work and that I would be back in 2 days. She seemed pleased with my plans that night. I considered my options in a calmer state. Can I reconcile with my wife? Should I try? It seemed like a one-time short affair. She didn't love this guy, but they were clearly close. However, this was not just an accidental fall. This was planned in advance. It was a sign of her disrespect for me and our marriage. I couldn't live with it. I couldn't stay married to this woman, the woman I'd loved for so long. She ruined everything. Perhaps I was not as good a person as Emma. I just couldn't forgive and forget never. I needed to move on and I needed to get revenge, since killing an unfaithful wife and her lover was not considered socially acceptable. I had to my moral satisfaction in some other way. These thoughts swirled around in my head until I finally fell asleep. My children were old enough to come to me and we could see each other often. The next day I went to see a lawyer and we discussed my options. Since we did not have a prenuptial agreement, all joint assets will be divided equally. Since my inheritance money was used for the down payment on the house, I was likely entitled to a larger share of the sale of the house. He said the children are old enough for their wishes to be considered in physical custody decisions, but since their mother has been the primary caregiver for most of their lives, she will likely receive primary physical custody. He said there is also a 50-50 chance of physical custody, but only if both parties agree. The lawyer said that the house would remain until the youngest child turned 18 and then it could be sold and divided in half minus my down payment. Although she had a full-time job, I made significantly more than Zoe and had much more in my retirement accounts. My lawyer said I might have to pay her alimony for a while as well as child support. I told him I wanted a divorce and that I would force her to agree to my terms. He said that all documents will be ready in a week. I thought my children would be home. Before then I went to the banks and organized our bank accounts for the divorce process. I checked the time. It was time to return early. I parked my car at the end of the street from our house, took my gun bag and went home. I entered the house quietly through the back door. Everything was clean. I sneaked upstairs to the master bedroom. I burst into the bedroom and shot the cheaters who were having sex. I fired both salt charges at them. They literally flew off the bed, howling in pain and fear. I admired my work for a couple of moments. When the 2 traitors realized that they were not seriously wounded, I threw the empty shotgun on the floor and cleared my throat. They froze, looking at me with grimaces of pain on their faces. I looked at them with contempt. I slowly deliberately took the gun out of my jacket pocket. Then I let the anger spill over my face. "I'll kill you," I screamed. The young lover and my cheating wife screamed in fear. My wife and Max pissed themselves out of fear of death. I aimed the gun at young Maxby, my unfaithful wife moans, and in a voice full of pain. "Don't kill him," ignoring her, "please." I deliberately walked towards him. He closed his eyes and cowered. My rage was not feigned. It was nice seeing him rolling around on the floor in agony, with tears on his face covered in urine and his ass full of small salt buckshot satisfied my sense of revenge. I regained my composure. I gave up on this marriage, but I wanted to leave a small reminder to the 2 cheaters. I waited until he recovered a little. Zoe lay on the floor, clutching the sheet to her chest, an expression of fear and confusion on her face. She was silent. Once he was back to breathing evenly. I put the gun to his head again and said, "You little bastard, you'll learn to stay away from my wife." Max moaned in pain and begged for his life. "Don't kill me, why not? Or are you dropping out of SeaTac? If I let you live, are you willing to drop out of college and take care of my wife when I divorce?" That the moaning young boy in love wanted to play the knight in shining armor. "Yes, I'll give it up. I will support her." I shook my head with pity then. "You are completely stupid. You are a stupid boy if you give up your academic future for a almost 20 years older than you." I paused. "I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to kill you or you. She's a corrupt and you're a stupid child. Neither of you are worth this." I sighed. The air was full of relief because they knew I wouldn't kill them, but they were wallowing in their own urine in pain and hopefully shame. I turned to Max and told him in a cold voice, "But if I see you next to my wife again, I will kill. You understand me why?" "Yes, I know." My cheating wife was moaning in pain in the background and crying. I continued. "Listen, Maxby, here's what's going to happen. You won't tell anyone anything about what happened here today. Understood? By the end of the week you'll be out of town forever. I don't care where you go, but you will go and you will be gone until the end of the summer. Maybe you'll head to California early to check out the campus. I don't care, but you'll be leaving town if I see you here after the end of the week. You're a dead man. Do you understand me?" Max looked at me and I knew he believed every word. I said yes. I thought about the fact that I didn't want to pay my nasty wife alimony or excessive child support. So I decided another directive was needed to protect her job. "One last thing, lover boy, I don't want you to say a word to anyone about your dirty little affair with my wife. If I find out that you told even one person about what you did to her, or about this morning, I'll put a damn bullet in your face. You know, I understand, I haven't told anyone anything about this and I never will, I promise." I looked at him long and intently. Finally, I put the gun in my pocket and said, "I believe you, Maxby, it's the only reason you're still alive. That, and it's obvious to me that you're just a weak, stupid child. I regret this favor." He shook his head desperately. "Your ass will hurt like hell for a few days, but it won't do any real harm. I pricked you with salt. When you get home, take a shower and wash yourself thoroughly. Maybe wear a bandit. Don't do this. I need to go to the doctor or something. The scabs should go away in a week or two. If anyone asks, you fell off your bike. Okay, get dressed and leave." The young bastard got dressed and left the house. I closed the door behind him. I returned to the bedroom, where my wife was still cowering with tears running down her face. I said, "Go take a shower." She went to the bathroom moaning and crying. I went to the kitchen and poured a full glass of cold milk. I always preferred milk. It had a calming effect on me. I smiled wryly and drank my scum. Wife finished her shower. I heard her crying in the bedroom. She started when I spoke to her. "Get dressed and wait for me here. I'll be back in an hour. We need to talk about something." "Jake, I just shut up." "Mel. We can talk when I get back. Just wait for me here." I threw the bag with the shotgun and pistol into the car and drove them back to my parents' house. My father met me there. He looked at me with a question in his eyes. Yes, everything went as we planned. She was there with him scurrying away like a couple of rabbits. Just dropped the weapon. "Dad, I don't think any of them will scream, but it would be better if the weapons disappeared." He nodded and I returned home. There were no police, which was a good sign. My wife was in the bedroom cleaning urine from the carpet. I looked at her at 36. She was still a beautiful woman. I sighed and she turned around with a look of deep sadness on her face. I felt empty. Much of my hatred and anger dissipated after my previous encounter. If you put a couple of salt shells and a couple of scammers, it will do it for you, Jake. I'm really sorry, is it true? I won't lie to you. It wasn't our only time, but it will be our last time. Just stop, Mel. I said tiredly. Please, Jake, just let me tell you I've never done anything like this before. I didn't plan this. Well, at least I wasn't looking for it. I do not love him, it's just. He was so special to me and we got so close and look. There's no excuse for this. But no, there's no excuse, Ma, but there are consequences. Please, Jake. I know what I did was wrong, but I didn't think straight. He was so in love with me. It pleased my ego. I thought I was giving him a gift. He was a virgin and you also decided to be his teacher in the bedroom. I understand, Mel. You wanted a little change and this baby was your opportunity. No, Jake, this was not the case. It's not that I wanted something that you didn't give me. He wasn't nearly as good in bed as you. For God's sake, he's just a child. Yes, he is like that about this. How stupid are you, Mel? You don't think a kid would talk to his friends about how his hot math teacher him and you're sexy, Mel? Don't you think that even if it never reaches the rumor stage, don't you think rumors about it will slip away? Haven't you thought about how things like this could hurt you, your career, your marriage? Max didn't tell anyone. Mel. The little bastard would have let it slide. Maybe not today, maybe not this summer, but at some point when he's back in town over Thanksgiving break, maybe he'll be hanging out with his friends, having had too much beer, and he'll say something. Just drop a few details, and that's all it takes. Mel, well, you're walking around on the side in the first place. Please, Jake, I know you're angry. You have every right to do this. I don't blame you, but please you must understand that I love you very much. This is just a situation that has gotten out of control. It was a trip for my ego, disguised as good intentions. I promise I've never done this before and I'll never do it again. Well, I'm certainly glad you didn't plan on making you an annual prize for the best student in math. Look, Mel, you haven't asked me yet, but I know what's going on. I'm moving into the guest room for a while. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, but I want you to just give me some space and leave me alone until I figure it out. Understood? Yes, Jake, I understand. The children returned home a couple of days later. Zoe and I tried to act normal in front of them. The kids were happy to tell us about their time at camp, but then became so busy with their friends and other things that I don't think they noticed anything unusual between Mel and me. I saw that Mel carried herself with courage, although she was a nervous wreck to her credit. She left me alone for several days. I took pity on her. Mel, can we talk? I asked one evening when the children had already gone to bed. Yes, of course, Jake, her eyes expressed concern. I decided that we need to get a divorce. Oh no, she moaned, but quietly so as not to wake the children. I was impressed by her composure. Yes, Mel, I was going to serve you with divorce papers tomorrow. Well, I'm still going, but I didn't want it to be a complete surprise. I wouldn't say I owe you this after what you did, but I wanted to tell you this face to face. Zoe understood, but asked the obligatory question. In such cases, please, Jake, is there no hope for reconciliation? I love you. I screwed up. I don't quite understand why Max was never a threat to us. Oh my God, please Bert, please. She begged with tears in her eyes. No, Mel, no. This wasn't a random drunken. I could forgive that. No, what you did was a deliberate decision to become a virgin sex teacher for a few weeks. I don't know exactly why, and I don't care you did it on purpose. The woman I married would not have done this, would not have risked our marriage and our family to satisfy some curiosity or pity or flatter her ego or anything else. No, you've changed, Mel, and now I've changed. You broke your vows and now I am free from this marriage and I don't believe in open marriages. Mel, this may work for someone, but it will never work for me to get freedom from this marriage. I need to divorce you. My decision is final. And then the sobbing began. She was inconsolable, shaking with sobs choking from her own pain. I felt some pity for her, but I thought it over. I was adamant in my decision, but almost against my will, I was touched by her pain. She finally regained some of her composure. To her credit, we can say that she did not delay her pleas. I wasn't sure if she accepted my decision. I didn't know how she would react when the process took its course, but at least she was rational again. I understand, Jake. You are going to divorce me and our marriage is over. What will happen now? Tomorrow you will be given the documents. No matter how angry I am, no matter how angry I was before. I don't hate you that much anymore, and I don't want to completely destroy you. We still have our children. We will be bound by their interests in the future. Yes, we'll still have them, won't we, Jake? She managed to smile, but sadly, and risked looking into my eyes with hope. I wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she didn't find it. The smile disappeared and she looked down at her hands again. You should get a lawyer, Mel, and have him look into my divorce suit, but I recommend that you accept the terms of the divorce. They are fair and I don't want to fight you. I have offered joint legal custody of our children with you as the primary physical guardian here in this house, and I will receive unlimited visitation and physical custody every other week, and I will also pick them up for a month in the summer. You work less than me and have always been a good mother to them, so it's only fair that they stay here with you. I suggested standard child support based on our incomes, but there will be no alimony. You get half of our liquid assets and I get half. I'll keep my retirement accounts and you'll keep yours and your pension, and when the kids grow up, we'll sell the house and split the proceeds in half, but I'll get the down payment back with interest. I understood. I will accept these terms of divorce. Will you tell our children why we are getting a divorce? I won't tell them until Sophie graduates, if at all, and I won't show them the video of you and Maxby. I promise you this. Do you have a video? Yes, and recordings of conversations too. I have all the evidence to destroy you. An expression of fear flashed across her face. Don't worry, Mel. I was prepared to use them as leverage if necessary, but you were cooperative. Stay cooperative and I promise they will never see the light of day. Tomorrow we will tell the children that we are getting a divorce. I'll move in with my parents the next day. She made one last attempt. Jake, it will be difficult to live without you or my only love, please. Her voice was weak and soft, like the whisper of a child. I steeled myself. I'm sorry, Mel, after I move if you need anything related to the house or the kids, you have my number, but what about everything else? My decision is final, so it will be. Zoe started crying again. It was difficult to tell the children that we were getting a divorce. We didn't say anything about Zoe's affair with Max, and the kids were confused. They cried and we promised them that it was not their fault but that there was no chance of reconciliation. The next day I moved in and started a new chapter of my life. My parents were sad about our divorce, but they were happy for their grandchildren to spend every other weekend with them. Over time, everyone got used to it. I haven't dated much. He worked a lot, saw the children as often as possible and did not devote much time to women. After a year or so, I started to feel very lonely. I tried online dating and the like, but none of the women I met were attracted to me. It seemed that every woman I was interested in was either bitter with men or a woman of easy virtue. The latter category made for some fun dates, but I was interested in something serious and long-term. At random I researched international dating sites. I had always been interested in Buddhism and ended up on a website dedicated to meeting Lyosan women. There I met. Her name was Lena Bungu. She was beautiful, young and smart. She was a well-educated university graduate from a Lyosan school. Her father was a surgeon. Her mother a nurse. She was looking for an American. We started corresponding and everything went well. She spoke English fluently. Did I mention she was beautiful? She was tall for a Lyosan girl 53, with long black hair, dark eyes and light honey brown skin, small but with beautiful breasts almost too big for her small body. I was drawn to her. I told her I was recently divorced and had 2 teenagers. At first I thought it would be difficult for her, but she only wanted to know the circumstances of my divorce. I told her the truth and she said she would never cheat on me. After months of texting and video chatting, we planned my trip to LA to meet her. I used my secret money for this trip. I flew into Vietnam via Bangkok and Leia, and my parents met me at the airport and took me to my hotel. Leia lived with her parents. Lena looked better in person than in the video and she smiled with all her heart. When we first met in person, I fell in love with her at first sight. We had lunch or dinner with her family several times during my 3-week stay day. We went on excursions with her parents. I also went out alone with Lena, but it was obvious that family was an important part of her life. One day Lena, I and her friend were in a restaurant. Her friend was a teacher like Lena and she told me when Lena went to the toilet that Lena had a fiancé who died at work a week before their wedding. She said Lena was depressed for several months after this and finally came out of it after a few months. Lena still hadn't met anyone, so her friend suggested she try a dating site. She was on it for a few months without any real interest in anyone until she met me. She noticed that I was like medicine for her, that she really came to life when we started texting. She warned me not to break Lena's heart. I knew that Lena had a fiancé who died, but I didn't know about her depression and the rest. It touched me before leaving. I knew what I had to do. Very simply, I asked her if she wanted to be my wife and she said yes. I gave her an engagement ring. She knew the Western custom and was glad to have the ring. We kissed, hugged and swore our love to each other. I left and we started planning a wedding across the ocean. 6 months later, my children and I went to Vietnam. The wedding was a big event, with Buddhist monks present, and lasted for several days. After the wedding, I returned home with my new wife. I later found out that my children told Zoe that I married a girl from La Sophie, and Adam told me that she cried a lot and was very sad for several weeks. Love with Lena was amazing. To my surprise, she was a virgin, but she was a quick learner, had a good understanding of her body and was very responsive. She was an acrobat in bed with enough energy for 3. We just couldn't get enough of each other. And it wasn't just in the bedroom. We loved each other, even without sex. We always touched each other when we were together, always kissed, held hands and always hugged. We gave ourselves completely to each other. We both knew what it was like to love and lose and didn't waste time or energy on anything other than expressing our love for each other. The months flew by my company's Christmas party. My fiancée was 5 months pregnant and she was still an amazingly beautiful woman. She wore a party dress that showed off her legs and her ever-expanding breasts, but hid her rapid-growing belly. Anna and her husband Jim congratulated us at a corporate party. Our first daughter's name was Mia, after my mother. A year later we had another beautiful daughter whom we named Zoe. Lena communicated with her family and friends on Skype. My grandmother died and left me some money. After discussing with Lena, we decided to move into my old home to have room for our growing family. Zoe accepted my ransom offer. Zoe was honest, relieved, since she and Sophie hadn't gotten along since we got divorced. Zoe confessed to her a couple of years ago that the reason for our divorce was that she cheated on me. Sophie called her and didn't speak to her for months. Over time, normality returned, but Sophie always remained rather cold towards Zoe. After that, Adam, having learned about the circumstances of our divorce, was angry with her, but recognized that she was his mother and forgave her more quickly. Anyway, I bought out Zoe's share and she bought herself a nice apartment. Adam and I helped Zoe move into the apartment and she thanked me. Sophie went to her grandparents instead of helping her mother. I no longer hated Zoe. I was just neutral towards her. My heart was filled with love for Lila and my 4 children. I'd like Sophie to completely forgive her mother, but it's not my place to put pressure on her. I told her that her mother loved her and had always been a good mother to her, and that it would be better for both of them if she ever forgave her. My love for Lena grew, as did hers for me. Sophie moved away for college and my younger children were growing up quickly. When Zoe was almost 2 years old, Lena told me that she was going to wean her off breastfeeding. This was a disappointment for me, because not only did I love her engorged breasts, but we also included nursing in our sex games. There is nothing more erotic and bonding than a wife feeding her husband. What can I say? I've always preferred milk. Years have passed. My older children graduated from college and found jobs nearby. My youngest children were growing up quickly. I haven't followed Zoe too much, but I know she dated someone, but never took it too far. At some point it seemed that she began a serious relationship with a man and he moved into her apartment. It turned out that this person was an abuser. He threw my ex-wife down the stairs, breaking her leg and arm. The man was arrested and Zoe was hospitalized. Adam was visiting his mother and called me. He said Zoe cried all day because her daughter didn't come to see her. I told Lena what Adam told me. Lena was angry. She went to Sophie and told her that she should visit her mother. Confronted with her behavior and her responsibility to her mother, Sophie burst into tears. Lena hugged her and reassured her, saying that it was time to make peace with Zoe. I took Sophie to the hospital. We came to her room. When she saw us, she cried with joy. She thanked me for bringing our daughter. Sophie and Zoe cried and forgave each other. I left the room. Later I returned and Sophie went to the toilet. Zoe asked if I could forgive her. I told her that I could and had already forgiven her. She cried a lot again, but this time they were tears of relief and happiness. I told her that I hoped for her future happiness and I found mine with Lena and our children. My daughter returned to the room and promised that she would visit her again soon. A year later my daughter was getting married. The wedding was a huge event. Our 2 little daughters were very excited because they were flower girls. I took Sophie to her fiancé, Adam led his mother and Lena to their seats. Zoe and I were polite to each other, but I tried to avoid her without making it obvious. I have forgiven her, but I will never be able to completely forget her betrayal. She talked a lot with Lena. Later told me that Zoe was very friendly to her. At one point late in the evening, as the party was winding down, long after my younger daughters had been picked up by the sitters, Zoe approached me as I sat at the table with Lena and my old neighbor, Sarah, without any decorum. She said to me in a sad voice, "Jake, I see how much you and Lena love each other. I'm sad that we can never have this again, all because of my stupid mistake. You look so good, so young, so lively and energetic, and I'm just an aging lonely woman now stunned. I had an idea, Zoe. I guess I'm living proof that after you've been changed, different gyms really do train the body better." Sarah blushed. Zoe just looked embarrassed and Leah, who I told the story of Sarah trying to seduce me years ago, jumped into my lap, hugged me and kissed me. "That's true, my love, but don't look for any other gym other than mine for the rest of your life," Lena said, and I didn't look. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.